What's good? What's good? Today I'm going to do a little reading from Dreams by Carl Jung. I mentioned in my last video about emotions and all of that. One of the best ways to understand other people is to understand yourself. Analyzing your dreams is one way you can learn more about yourself. I also really like the work of Carl Jung because he advocates essentially for extreme compassion or extreme objective disconnection from the subject being analyzed, which enables the best clinical environment, but then also the best psychic environment in terms of analyzing and understanding people. This involves like trying to put yourself in the shoes of someone like Mao Zedong. It's unfathomable almost to look at that person without judgment, but it is necessary to understand their capacity for evil and how the capacity for evil is something that we all possess to some extent. It's a spectrum. Everything's a spectrum. That's why I like the yin and the yang symbol. Okay, anyways, let's read. On the nature of dreams. Medical psychology differs from all other scientific disciplines in that it has to deal with the most complex problems without being able to rely on tested rules of procedure, on a series of verifiable experiments and logically explicable facts. On the contrary, it is confronted with a mess of shifting, irrational happenings, for the psyche is perhaps the most baffling and unapproachable phenomenon with which the scientific mind has ever had to deal. Although we must assume that all psychic phenomena are somehow, in the broadest sense, causally dependent, it is advisable to remember at this point that causality is in the last analysis no more than a statistical truth. Therefore, we should perhaps do well in certain cases to make allowances for absolute irrationality, even if, on heuristic grounds, we approach each particular case by inquiring into its causality. Even then, it is advisable to bear in mind at least one of the classical distinctions, namely that between causa efficiens and causa finalis. In psychological matters, the question, why does it happen, is not necessarily more productive of results than the other question, to what purpose does it happen? Among the many puzzles of medical psychology, there is one problem child, the dream. It would be an interesting as well as difficult task to examine the dream exclusively in its medical aspects. That is, with regard to the diagnosis and prognosis of pathological conditions. The dream does in fact concern itself with both health and sickness, and since, by virtue of its source in the unconscious, it draws upon a wealth of subliminal perceptions, it can sometimes produce things that are very well worth knowing. This has often proved helpful to me in cases where the differential diagnosis between organic and psychogenic symptoms presented difficulties. For prognosis, too, certain dreams are important. In this field, however, the necessary preliminary studies, such as careful records of case histories and the like, are still lacking. Doctors with psychological training do not as yet make a practice of recording dreams systematically, so as to preserve material which would have a bearing on the subsequent outcome of severe illness or a lethal issue. In other words, on events which could not be foreseen at the beginning of the record. The investigation of dreams in general is a life work in itself, and their detailed study requires the cooperation of many workers. I have therefore preferred, in this short review, to deal with the fundamental aspects of dream psychology and interpretation in such a way that those who have no experience in this field can at least get some idea of the problem and method of inquiry. Anyone who is familiar with the material will probably agree with me that a knowledge of fundamentals is more important than an accumulation of case histories, which still cannot make up for lack of experience. The dream is a fragment of involuntary psychic activity, just conscious enough to be reproducible in the waking state. Of all psychic phenomena, the dream presents perhaps the largest number of irrational factors. It seems to possess a minimum of that logical coherence and that hierarchy of values shown by other contents of consciousness, and is therefore less transparent and understandable. Dreams that form logically, morally, or aesthetically satisfying wholes are exceptional. Usually, a dream is a strange and disconcerting product distinguished by many bad qualities, such as lack of logic, questionable morality, uncouth form, and apparent absurdity or nonsense. People are therefore only too glad to dismiss it as stupid, meaningless, and worthless. Every interpretation of a dream is a psychological statement about certain of its contents. This is not without danger, as the dreamer, like most people, usually displays an astonishing sensitiveness to critical remarks, not only if they are wrong, but even more if they are right, since it is not possible, except under very special conditions, to work out the meaning of a dream without the collaboration of the dreamer. An extraordinary amount of tact is required not to violate their self-respect unnecessarily. For instance, what is one to say when a patient tells a number of indecent dreams and then asks, "Why should I have such disgusting dreams?" To sort this sort of question, it is better to give no answer, since an answer is difficult for several reasons, especially for the beginner, and one is very apt under such circumstances to say something clumsy, above all when one thinks one knows what the answer is. So difficult is it to understand a dream that for a long time I have made it a rule, when someone tells me a dream and asks for my opinion, to say first of all to myself, I have no idea what this dream means. After that, I can begin to examine the dream. Here, the reader will certainly ask, is it worthwhile in any individual case to look for the meaning of a dream, supposing that dreams have any meaning at all, and that this meaning can be proved? It is easy to prove that an animal is a vertebrate by laying bare the spine. But how does one proceed to lay bare the inner meaningful structure of a dream? Apparently, the dream follows no clearly determined laws or regular modes of behavior, apart from the well-known typical dreams, such as nightmares. Anxiety dreams are not unusual, but they are no means the rule. Also, there are typical dream motifs known to the layman, such as of flying, climbing stairs or mountains, going about with insufficient clothing, losing your teeth, crowds of people, hotels, railways, stations, trains, aeroplanes, automobiles, frightening animals. These motifs are very common, but by no means sufficient to confirm the existence of any system in the organization of a dream. Some people have recurrent dreams. This happens particularly in youth, but the recurrence may continue over several decades. These are often very impressive dreams, which convince one that they must surely have a meaning. Sorry, I just kind of made some connections about my own dreams. That was, whoa, okay, yeah, wicked. Okay, these are often very impressive dreams, which convince one that they must surely have a meaning. This feeling is justified insofar as one cannot, even taking the most cautious view, avoid the assumption that a definite psychic situation does arise from time to time which causes the dream. But a psychic situation is something that, if it can be formulated, is identical with a definite meaning, provided, of course, that one does not stubbornly hold to the hypothesis, certainly not proven, that all dreams can be traced back to the stomach trouble or sleeping on one's back or the like. Such dreams do indeed tempt one to conjecture some kind of cause. The same is true of so-called typical motifs, which repeat themselves frequently in longer series of dreams. Here again, it is hard to escape the impression that they mean something. But how do we arrive at a plausible meaning, and how can we confirm the rightness of the interpretation? One method, which, however, is not scientific, would be to predict future happenings from the dreams by means of a dream book and to verify the interpretation by subsequent events, assuming, of course, that the meaning of dreams lies in their anticipation of the future. Another way to get at the meaning of the dream directly might be to turn to the past and reconstruct former experiences from the occurrence of certain motifs in the dreams. While this is possible to a limited extent, it would have a decisive value only if we could discover in this way something which, though it had actually taken place, had remained unconscious to the dreamer, or at any rate something he would not like to divulge under any circumstances. If neither is the case, then we are under any. Okay, I'm going to restart that. I'm sorry. If neither is the case, then we are dealing simply with memory images whose appearance in the dream is A, not denied by anyone, and B, completely irrelevant so far as a meaningful dream function is concerned, since the dreamer could just as well have supplied the information consciously. This unfortunately exhausts the possible ways of proving the meaning of a dream directly. It is Freud's great achievement to have put dream interpretation on the right track. Above all, he recognized that no interpretation can be undertaken without the dreamer. The words composing a dream narrative have not just one meaning, but many meanings. If, for instance, someone dreams of a table, we are still far from knowing what the table of the dreamer signifies, although the word table sounds unambiguous enough. For the thing we do not know is that this table is the very one at which his father sat when he refused the dreamer all further financial help and threw him out of the house as a good-for-nothing. The polished surface of this table stares at him as a symbol of his lamentable worthlessness in his daytime consciousness, as well as in his dreams at night. This is what our dreamer understands by table. Therefore, we need the dreamer's help in order to limit the multiple meanings of words to those that are essential and convincing. That the table stands as a mortifying landmark in the dreamer's life may be doubted by anyone who was not present. But the dreamer does not doubt it, nor do I. Clearly, dream interpretation is in the first place an experience which has immediate validity for only two persons. If, therefore, we establish that the table in the dream means just the fatal table, with all that this implies, then, although we have not explained the dream, we have at least interpreted one important motif of it. That is, we have recognized the subjective context in which the word table is embedded. We arrived at this conclusion by a methodical questioning of the dreamer's own associations. The further procedures to which Freud subjects the dream contents I have had to reject, for they are too much influenced by the preconceived opinion that dreams are the fulfillment of repressed wishes. Although there are such dreams, this is far from proving that all dreams are wish fulfillments, any more than are the thoughts of our conscious psychic life. There is no ground for the assumption that the unconscious processes underlying the dream are more limited and one-sided in form and content than conscious processes. One would rather expect the latter could be limited to known categories, since they usually reflect the regularity or even monotony of the conscious way of life. Oh, okay, my back's hurting, so I'm going to stop. But if you watched, thank you very much for listening. Carl Jung, check him out. Much love.